First, I want to thank BronxNet for coming out, being able to broadcast this across the Bronx, so there'll be a lot more people watching. The importance of this film is a few things. One, accountability, but also two, understanding the history of this place. I'm going to invite everyone to look up a report we did called Killing Rikers. It's on the Incarcerated Nation website, incarceratednation.org. And Killing Rikers is a report between Columbia Journalism and Incarcerated Nation that speaks to Rikers Island from 1650. So the history of Rikers from 1650 to now, so that you can understand the sort of decadent system that we're dealing with. Rikers Island at one time held 20 to 30,000 people incarcerated and was literally a warehouse for those people of color in the city. We're going to have some panelists tonight that I want to introduce first. First, Jazz Hayden, one of the founders and literally one of the organizing mentors of my life, who's also inspired me in Incarcerated Nation. Also the founder of, oh my God, I don't know this, the campaign Ending Jim Crow, countless productions and organizations, and including his work on bail reform, which we'll talk about tonight, and one of the key issues of cash bail, which is like a ransom city for the city. Jazz Hayden is a Harlem historian, also in a lot of documentary films, which you will see as well here. He himself had started the Stop and Frisk movement watching Cop Watch. So he created Cop Watch, and then his sort of proteges had created Cop Watches in every borough. So this man has literally influenced so many, from behind the wall and then outside the wall. Also the think tank from years ago, inside of prison, and also voter registration and felon disenfranchisement is one of his expertise. This is one of the men, the only man in New York State that actually held legislative hearings inside the prison, where the legislators had to come in and literally talk to people incarcerated. So I want to introduce Joseph Jazz Hayden of the Campaign to End Jim Crow. First up. Please have a seat. Thank you. The next panelist is a dear friend of mine, but also a comrade in the movement, Mr. Robert Johnson, who's also a historian in the community, but also works here in Mid-Bronx, providing services for most of the elderly in this area, 32 properties in this district, food pantry services, Meals for Wheels, a full construction class, literally changing the lives of so many people in this system, caught up in this system that are disenfranchised from it. So I want to introduce Robert Johnson of Mid-Bronx Senior Council as well here. And also my comrade from Closed Rikers as well. This brother had served time on Rikers, but also time inside. Right now, he is between school and working with Just Leadership USA, which is a mentorship and training program as well. And I wanted to give each panelist a little time to just quickly reflect and speak about this series. I myself, my name is Five Mualim Ak, and I'm the founder and co-founder and director of Incarcerated Nation Corp., which is hosting his film screenings with Andrew Freeman Home and Bronx Art Space. It is a series called State Property. So I want to firstly introduce and give Jazz and Mr. Johnson, and also my comrade here, a chance to reflect on the film and speak a little bit about what was their impact and what was their message. Jazz was actually in this film, but the final cut, they didn't have enough time to put everyone's opinion in there. And they said that he had enough input to make her own film by himself. So I wanted to maybe open up for just some initial thoughts about it, and then we can go into some questions.
Yeah, Rikers Island, this viewing of this film kind of took me back a whole bunch of years, man. You know, probably 40, 50 years. And I reflected on my experience in Rikers Island, and I came to the conclusion, because I became an activist in prison, and I was very well read, and I observed what was going down in Rikers Island. In Rikers Island, the problem there was a simple problem. everything that went wrong in Rikers Island was a result of the phone, the food, and the television. And all of these areas were supposed to be controlled by the correction officers. But the correction officers came from the same neighborhoods and the same projects as the inmates. You know, you go to Rikers Island, man, you can't tell the difference between an inmate and a correction officer. You know, because they both come out of the same background. Upstate, when we go to prison, it's the keeper and the kept are totally different. You know, the keeper is white, rural, and the kept is urban, people of color, right? But Rikers Island, man, it's like it's incredible, man, that these same people. I mean, you can't tell the difference between the keeper and the kept, you know, and their response to violence on Rikers Island, they are the initiators of this, right? Because they fail to do their job and control the telephone, the food, and the television. You understand? This is what all of these groups form around, right? So I remember the Crips and the Bloods. Now, you know, usually things are initiated on the East Coast. You know, I said, where did this Bloods and Crips thing come from, right? And it was because the Latin Kings had control of Rikers Island, and the kids that came in there had to form an opposing gang. Mm-hmm. And so they Crips and the Bloods came all the way from the West Coast. And you know, and so this is how they came into existence. And then they travel upstate, and they produce the same thing up there, right? The Crips and the Bloods and the Latin Kings, you know, all of them transfer their experience upstate. And then they go into the streets. You know, so our whole gang thing began on Rikers Island. It began on Rikers Island. That's where it came from. And we look at problem and solution, right? You know, once you define the problem, then you have to look at the solution. And the solution is elimination of cash bail. That population would drop on Rikers Island overnight, right? The Constitution gives you the presumption of innocence. So what am I doing sitting in a jail because I can't pay bail? You know, it ain't got nothing to do with my innocence, right? And so we have to eliminate that cash bail. And we have to begin to look at the district attorneys who are also co-conspirators, you know, with judges and the whole criminal justice chain, right? But I think we focus in too much on the police, and we need to move up the chain. You know, we have to eliminate cash bail, and that would eliminate Rikers Island. I mean, Rikers Island is just one jail in New York. You know, it's, you know, they have them in the Bronx, and they have it in the Tombs, and you know, Kings County, You know, so what would you do to impact all of these jails? You know, not just Rikers Island, man. I mean, this is a good thing that we focus on Rikers Island. That'll bring attention to the solutions to the problem. But they talking about instituting, build, you know, closing Rikers Island in 10 years, and then
building 5 more.
Yeah, 5 more jails. Get out of here, man. The problem can't be fixed. You know, it can't be fixed. You know, in no other country, a developed country in Europe, does to their people, their citizens, what America does. You know, America is outrageous. You know.
We want to touch on cash bail, but
yeah.
Mr. Johnson,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, and if you could speak on your experiences as well, and what was your thoughts on the film initially watching it?
I'm gonna go over this real quick. Wow, that documentary really took me back. I visited Rikers Island in the 60s. In the 60s, Rikers Island, you see that bridge that they talked about? There was no bridge. It was a ferry boat. And the only way that the reason why they built that bridge is because one day the ferry had sunk, or cut a hole in it and sunk. And I think it was like 21 prisoners drowned. And they decided to stop the ferry and put on the bridge. But in watching this documentary and dealing with the 70s, looking at the history of the evolution of Rikers Island from the 60s, well, it was quite different. And what I'm picturing at this particular time is an evolution of mental insanity and enslavement, which pre-exists from every facet over there on Rikers Island. What do I mean by that? It seems as though the people who are given jobs to govern and protect, they themselves have mental health issues. To end up participating in activities such as violence, sexual, deviant, predatory behaviors, beatings, slashing. That's insane. For you to call yourself on one side, it sounds something like that Trayvon Martin case, where this guy that was supposed to have killed him had wanted to become a police officer, and they didn't let him become the police officer because he failed the psychiatric examination. And after he failed the psychiatric examination, they gave him a gun. So, and listening to Mr. Hayden, it's not the police officers that we should be looking at so far, but it's how the systems are predicated and what their role is in perpetuating these types of situations. Now let's look at it. Rikers Island, 750,000 men, or 7,500 men at any given time. And the people that are protecting them are women. I kept hearing every time one of the prisoners said, and the CO, she just looked. And the CO, she just looked. You know, and I was like, well, in the 60s, they didn't have men in women's prison guarding women, and they didn't have women guarding men, because when the violence perpetuated itself, you needed the brute force that you needed to handle that situation. So right there tells you that the system, again, plays a major role in creating this type of environment. It started when they closed down the mental health institutions, and now everybody's walking around with mental health issues thinking that they're normal. And now they want to close down Rikers Island. And somebody said, but what are they going to do when they do this to make sure that the people receive the services that they need? Yes, I have witnessed some of the things that was said on film about men raping men. One of the most horrible heinous things I still live with that thought. Okay? I've seen people lose limbs in prison. I've seen a 17-year-old child who mother and father had come to bail him out 2 hours after he jumped off the 3rd tier. When I was there, it wasn't no sliding doors. It wasn't no sliding doors. It was only the blocks. And my thing with it was predicated by the police also. I had gotten beaten up by 8 police officers in 108 precinct in Long Island City. And then I was charged with resisting arrest. And from there, they put me in what you call MO, mental observation. Now, that was 2 blocks. Mental observation and homicide. Anytime you had a homicide or you seen that you couldn't fit in population, that's where they stored you at. And you had to be observed before you was able to go into population. Now, in population, you didn't have all of those things that I hear people have now today, radios and TVs and things of that nature, and touching visits and all of that. No, you had a chicken wire fence with a phone, and you was on one side and they would go on the other side, and if they could hear what you were saying, because the phone was broken, because you was trying to hold the thing on there and whatnot, and then your time was up, so you never really seen or heard anybody. And you survived, not by gangs so much in those days, but it was by boroughs. It used to be Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. And then we had sex in each block. And then you dealt with it like that. And yes, it was the house gang and all of this and all of that, but we more or less like protected ourselves. There was fear of the police, but only if you involved yourself with them. But I'm just saying that this place is, from what I'm seeing, it really has the people that's supposed to protect you is crazy. I heard the minister who talked about that, he called it the Bing. That's what they put me in, the Bing. I don't remember the Bing. And they put me also in segregation because I was there during the time of Attica. And I could tell you some stories about that, but I don't think I have enough time. But those are the things that made me think about as that gentleman said, how did I end up getting there? How did I end up making that a part of my life? And so, because there's no rehabilitation in prison. There's none of that. It's just like what you said, what you see, and what you heard. It's no rehabilitation. So, the educational aspect, I see some of the brothers that after they finished their sentencing, one went on to work with the Fortune Society, and another one went and 5 started up the Incarcerated Nation and things of that nature. So we're educating the people out here in the community to not, you don't have to do what we did, because we did it for you. All you have to do is come and ask them, and they'll show you how not to do it. Because I think prison starts in your own mind. It's just like some people want to be a doctor. Some people want to be a lawyer. Some people want to be a gangbanger. And then once you get caught up in that, you find out whether it's right or wrong for you. And in the end, I seen one brother turned into a preacher, a pastor. It'll do that for you. It'll take you from one extreme to the other. I'm not going to, and then, I'm not going to say too much more right now. I'm going to pass it on to my fellow brother right here who has something to say.
Yeah. So, brother, you spent a time, probably several decades after these men, after these young men. You just describe a little bit, and also start with just introducing what you're doing with Just Leadership and how that is impacting your life as well.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rafael L. Carrera. I went through Rikers Island from the period of February 2000 to basically around July 2011, in and out of the system. 2 weeks after I turned 16, I was out on Rikers Island. But right now, that was all negative, but I'll get more into it. But right now, part of the Close Rikers campaign, I'm a 2017 emerging leader by Just Leadership USA. I'm 4 classes away from my associates in applied sciences. I'm interning right now at JO USA as well. Basically, the experiences I experienced on Rikers Island led me to become an advocate. Right now, I don't really like Rikers Island at all. I hope they close that shit down. Period. You know what I'm saying? The people that work there are horrible. They got some people that are alright. Some of the volunteers, some of the correctional officers are okay, but at the end of the day, they're all horrible. Bad people. You know what I'm saying? My first experience there, I could say, is especially with the bridge, man. Like that smell. As soon as you go over that bridge, that smell just rocks you to the core. It makes you get sick. And like the first time I ever went over that bridge, it's just the smells, like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? But then after that, every other time after that, it's like, yeah, it's getting ready. Like, like I already know what's gonna happen after this. I gotta go to the wild meat pens. I gotta punch somebody right out. Or like, it's just crazy. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I could tell you, like, my first experience there, my second day on Rikers Island, I was in Mod 1 as an adolescent. We took a hit for the CO. The COs, some adolescent came in acting real crazy, and the COs was like, well, we have an issue right here. Either y'all gonna take care of this issue I have, you know what I'm saying, or y'all gonna be all put on the burn. The burn is basically CO, when the all body in Rikers Island, all the adolescents would just sit on their beds for hours and hours and hours. So basically the people that was ready on the house was like, we ain't gonna get put on the burn, we gonna whip this motherfucker ass. That's what really would happen. We put hands and feet on this gentleman. And then after that happened, the COs came in. I remember the COs' names, but I wouldn't even blast them on that. They're always on Mod 1. They're probably still there from 2000 to 2000, you know what I'm saying? They're probably still there. And they came out congratulating us and giving us cigarettes. Like, yeah, what a good job y'all did. You know what I'm saying? That's my first experience I had on Rikers Island. And it just led up to that. You know, when I went into Rikers Island, my classification was like a 10. I could go to the sprungs and stuff like that. My last classification was a 99. I was an enhanced restraint inmates, admin seg, I had newspapers and stuff like that. I was also part of the gang life on Rikers Island, so I know how it is to go from actually fighting for everything and then to taking everything, to being the oppressor, to being the prey, to being the predator, you know what I'm saying? And it's that lifestyle that, you know what I'm saying, that all these gentlemen says, you question yourself, you be like in the box or the bin or in the wild meat pens and you be like, damn, is this what I'm capable of? Is this what I'm subjecting myself to for the rest of my life? And that's what made it bigger, you know what I'm saying? Then I thought of something bigger than me, and that's basically, they just treat us like animals and stuff like that. That's why I give to that's why I contribute to the Close Rikers campaign. That's why I'm a part of the Just Leadership USA, because I do believe those closest to the problem are, you know what I'm saying, are closest to the solution, but farthest away from the resources and just the ability to do anything. And that's why just anytime I get a chance to tell my story or contributing to like de-incarcerating, mass incarceration, I'll take my chance, because that is just basically, the prison industrial complex is just making money off of us. They look at us like we're just numbers, and it's just time that we like educate ourselves and do something about it.
I wanna thank you. We're all gonna share this microphone a little bit. I wanted to just speak about some of the things that built up, right? We worked on Rikers Island when I first came home. We was forming Jails Action Coalition, which was one of the first collective projects. We still attend every Board of the Corrections meeting. We still attend every BOC meeting. We invite everyone to come out as well to the Board of Corrections meetings, because those hearings are for public comment. Right now, they're going through rulemaking, which means they're making the rules that the city will adjust with for the next decades moving forward. So it's more vital now that we work on the rights and the human rights below minimum standards. Rikers started by having minimum standards. There was never rules for Rikers Island. And I think that that's where the work needed to be, to break down, well, what is the rules and how are these people breaking them? See, there is no rules, it's just minimum standards. That means the minimum amount of food to keep you alive, the minimum amount of expenses to keep you okay, right? The minimum amount of showers we need to detain you. But detention doesn't require a large crime. So that's the two things that didn't even out, right? So I wanted to talk about bail, because a dollar today is not a dollar what it was in 1968. It definitely wasn't in the 1970s. It wasn't in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, which this panel represents, right? So, one, the feeders that make Rikers Island what it is, when we did working with the Department of Justice for over 2 years, Incarcerated Nation had sort of been revealed to a lot of things that were constituent to people being on Rikers and remaining there. One was we created a juvenile task force with the Commissioner Pont. And some of the ideas we had, Terrell Muhammad, who's also in the film, works at the Correctional Association, also in the Juvenile Task Force, Victor Pate, and some of the questions we had were just off the top of our head. Like, well, why don't we check the backgrounds of the last 100 officers you hired? 80-something of them were felons for the same crimes that they were hiring them to guard other people for, right? So that showed the population of the keepers were just from the same as the kept. And there were other incidences that can be looked up in the Times report that we obviously helped support as well. And one of those DOI reports was around clearance and ability for officers to check themselves. We didn't know that they was going to check officers the next day and that the guy was going to try to bring in a pound of weed the next day, right? And then the third time was another report with the Department of Investigation where they said, you know what, I'm from investigations. Oh, so you never worked at Rikers. Well, we bet if you put that uniform on, you could walk around Rikers all day, nobody would question. He's like, I never worked there. The man put his uniform on. We packed him with Suboxones, razors, weed in his pocket, filled up his water bottle with vodka, like all the drugs and stuff. And he walked around for 8 hours. Nobody even knew him. He never worked there. So we see the same problems of the structure of it, the same abuse from the 60s and 70s that haven't changed, right? Cash bail has been one of your biggest pushes in the state of New York, also nationally, but in the state. You've inspired other states, you know, other groups like All of Us Is None, who also deal with bail on a national level. But in New York City, cash bail is almost like a ransom, right? We just finished doing a film with Time, the Khalif Browder story as well, 6-part series of Weinstein and Jay-Z. And you see how this young man, from having one juvenile incident, being young, like you were young when you was locked up, to then going to be held under a large amount of bail because of one incident when he was young. So I wanted to know if you can explain a little bit of cash bail and talk about it. And Mr. Johnson, if you can elaborate a little bit about how the bail system was then, because community was involved in some sense in your era. Not saying that it was too far ago, but it was different to get bail up. The community would come out and sort of put up money to get you out. Now that's astronomical. It's almost impossible. We just had a case that we resolved here at Andrew Freeman, the Pedro case, and his bail was $140,000 for something he didn't even do, which was actually $40,000 over what it was supposed to be, and we had to get RFK to bail him out for $100,000. So can we talk about cash bail and why this ransom system lets the rich not touch these places, and it only captures the poor? So maybe you can explain a little bit about what cash bail is in New York.
Cash bail, it overrides the presumption of innocence. Yeah. And the Constitution clearly states that bail should not be exorbitant, right? Washington, D.C. eliminated cash bail, I think 20 years ago. New Jersey just eliminated cash bail, right? And there's a movement all over this country to eliminate cash bail. Right? People, the only reason they on Rikers Island and in the jails of New York State is simply because of cash bail. Right? Now, if you get one of Trump's family gets arrested and given a bail, they're gonna make it. They're gonna make it.
So they wouldn't even touch Rikers.
Yeah, so they wouldn't even, they clearly wouldn't touch Rikers. Yeah. So bail is discriminates against the poor. And it's clear. Huh? It's clear as day. You can't fix it. You have to eliminate it, right? And since I'm so concerned with solutions, because everybody's talking about the problem, Black Lives Matter, hands up on the street, I think that we need to focus on how do we change this? You know, we can't, I mean, 10 years from now, they're going to close Rikers Island, and then they're going to build 4 more prisons. Yeah, 4 more jails. Yeah, that's insane. We can't. I mean, this is prisons, jails are a human construct. Human beings put that together. A bunch of raggedy ass human beings put that whole concept together. And we are sitting here trying to tweak it. We can't tweak it.
So you're saying the only way is to eliminate cash bail?
Yeah, it's eliminate cash bail, man. I mean, if the 13th Amendment, I'm quite sure that y'all are all familiar with it. It has an exception clause in the 13th Amendment that slavery is abolished except for those that are duly convicted of a crime. Slavery still exists in this Constitution. Huh? And prisoners are being treated like slaves. They have no rights. You understand that the white man is bound to respect, right? And
I think that's important to note that the majority of people on Rikers aren't convicted of any crime.
no, they're not convicted of any crime, man.
They're facing trial and court proceedings.
Yes, they're facing trial and court proceedings, and because they can't make bail, they have to, submit to all that stuff that we just saw on camera.
So, Mr.
Right.
Johnson, bail in your day was a different circumstance that didn't require sometimes property ownership, that didn't require a lot of money.
It didn't require a lot of money. Depending upon the situation, we used to have a thing where they would at least look at the person's communal ties.
Right.
They would look at the person's ties in the community. Does he work? Does he go to school? Is he in church? Things of that nature. And then basically the judge would, based on the nature of the situation, whether he should impose a bail or shouldn't impose a bail. But from what I'm seeing now, people are getting bail for selling cigarettes, 50 cents. And you put a $500 bill on somebody. I mean, come on, But those type of crimes are perpetuated by the system also, because there's certain times during the year where they come throughout our communities and they do what we call swoops, so that they can make quotas. And they go target certain populations, certain areas, and they swoop up a certain number of people who might be just standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then they, as somebody said, slavery, they chattel slave them into the nearest precinct, where they might have 200 or so individuals for the same offense, selling cigarettes or jumping turnstiles or whatever have you. To get those numbers up to say that the system is doing something. And that's why they say their thing is, what do they call it? Community life, those life, what do they call it? Life offenses or something like that. And then they don't focus on real crime. Quality of life infractions. That's how you got high numbers of that. And when it comes to murder in our communities, Biggie Smalls unsolved, Tupac Shakur unsolved, Run DMC unsolved. But everybody can get arrested for jumping the train.
Right. So there was a big difference.
And no.
So there was a big difference in your generation and your generation, right?
It really is, because
no, it is. So in the 80s, Reagan cut community-based funding, right, for mental health facilities. So by 1985, those people were on the street. And then we made it illegal to be on the street. We created these quality of life laws, as Mr. Johnson said. Anti-vagrancy laws, anti-panhandling laws, trespassing laws. Basically made it illegal to be young, black, and outside. Oh, and then so those people who were needing mental health, who depended on medication sometimes, were now homeless. So basically we made it illegal to be homeless too. No panhandling. We had Bratton creating the broken windows theory, but also he made squeegee men public enemy number one, the homeless. So from there on, we had a 400% increase. Oh, sorry, it's the 80s, so crack mysteriously hits the streets. So there's a cheap synthetic drug for you to medicate on, and then we create a war on those very drugs. So from there on, you have a 400% increase into the jail system, where your generation starts to grow up and come into the system of being hoarded in even bigger masses, where they would just pull up. You know, it's funny, I was watching this series, The Deuce. A friend of mine, Gabenga, is in this series called About 42nd Street. And they're like, oh, we're low on numbers, so the paddy wagon just pulls up and they just jump up and grab a bunch of prostitutes and women. But that has went to an occasional thing to being an everyday routine of how youth are arrested, you know?
Me personally, I never experienced that. Like, I keep it real. Every crime I committed, everything I got arrested for, I did it.
Right, but what you've seen in the community.
But definitely, when I was definitely inside prison, and when I was in the in the central bookings or in the 52nd precinct or the 50th or the 48th, you seen countless people that were like, yo, I was just going to the stores to get a Dutch. Like, I was just going to the store and get some diapers. Or it's like so many different stories that they was going to the store and they just getting snatched up, which is really like unbelievable. And then they all going to the island and they're gonna see this judge and they crime they constantly didn't commit. I remember I was held on Rikers Island for a $1,500 bail that I couldn't raise in. I was in there for a misdemeanor. I ended up doing like 6 months behind that. And then later on, years then, they came out with they wasn't allowed to frisk or strip search the inmates that went into prison for a misdemeanor. And I got like $1,500 back out of that. And I'm like, wow, this is the same money that I could have used to bail me out like 10 years ago. So it was just crazy, and like it's just constantly like that. Like also like in 2013, I was homeless. Like I was living right in front of the 125th Street. I got arrested 15 times. 15 times for sleeping in the street, hopping the train. It is a reality that the police do. They target people that are poor. They go right there in front of 125th and Lexington, and they just sit there all day. And then whenever there's time for them, when they deem it's necessary that they want to go back into the precinct, they arrest somebody, so they could go back to the precinct. And that's what they do. Like I literally got chased by like I lived on 125th Street from March of 2013 to September of 2013, living on top of scaffolds and all this stuff, getting arrested. And I got chased by like other like homeless individuals on 125th, and I tried to like go to the police because I was actually trying to do something with myself. I was going to Strive, I was going to these programs, and the police just looked at me like, go away from me, like you're bothering me. Like that is the reality of this. Like police don't really, like they just trying to make their quarters, they like supposedly they're invisible quarters. You know what I'm saying?
So you know, this system,
So, and this goes right back to you, Jazz, right? Because you know, policing, number one, right? We have a city where our ex-speaker, Melissa Mark Vitorito, who actually put in more cops and more police and actually helped turn the hospital security into police and then the shelter security into police. So we have more of a police force who are sort of doing this quota, right? You also are a man, and a lot of people don't know this, responsible for the really unity between the ACLU and Center for Constitutional Rights with Community United for Police Reform. And that allowed for the Right to Record Act and other bills to come out about your right to videotape officers doing their jobs. So during the stop and frisk system, right, we had over 650,000 arrests in this district, like every 90 to 120 days, right on Alexander, right between the 42nd precinct, literally a national numbered amount. Out of that, I think it lead to like less than 1% of arrests out of all of those. And you were empowering and starting a movement where community was responsible for community, where you said you had a right. If I'm paying your salary and you're a public servant, I have a right to videotape you doing your job. That led to a whole cop watch movement. But literally, you took that case, and Vince Warren and the Center for Constitutional Rights took that case all the way up to the federal court and won. And I think they just took the judge off, the mayor took the judge off the bench or something at that point, right? That case was astronomically and pointed a finger to a problem that's been feeding Rikers out. We live in New York State, where we have 62 counties. All those counties are named after prisons, and Rikers is the feeder.
sort of look at it like Ellis Island. You have Ellis Island, you have Rikers Island. Ellis Island is sort of shipping people and population up into the rest of the world through this clearinghouse. And then you have Rikers Island feeding the upstate rural communities. So you have a Brooklyn table, like Mr. Johnson said, in every facility. You got now a Harlem table, mostly Brooklyn, but you have now a Harlem table in every jail. But we see this sort of impact gentrification and also moving and clearing and storehousing and warehousing people from certain districts, right? So it's an attack on communities that starts with the pipeline from feeding in. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the system of stop and frisk and how important it is for citizens to take actions, right? Solutions, because policing is one of the answers. If we can stop the high arrest, like this meat being fed into a meat grinder in courts. I mean, I was in court not too long ago, and the ADA had a whole shelf of just people's lives, like folder after folder after folder after folder, and it becomes this clearinghouse, you know? So how does police control and community controlling their ability to call the police, reducing that amount, is really going to impact jails, right? Because that's the feeder, the main feeder is arrest. The majority of people are there for misdemeanors on Rikers itself. And let me just note this. Closing down an island, of course, if you want to build development, would take about 10 years because it's man-made. It was actually built by people incarcerated. There's no way you can construct a 70-floor, 50-floor building to something that was made by man itself. It's going to take a lot of time for that. And then also, what is your opinion around the policing and the amount of police that we have in New York State? Because we have the largest municipal police force on the planet. So can you talk about how stop and frisk feeds up and the importance of community solutions to ending the large amount of police in New York City? Because them not doing their job and basically arresting under quotas is one of the biggest problems. Sorry, long question.
Well, we have been, what we neglected here tonight was the historical perspective, right? And we have to remember that slavery was the main institution historically in the building of America, right? And under slavery, they had complete control of their labor force. They had complete control, you know, and poor whites were the slave catchers, you know. But when slavery was abolished in 1865, the plantation doors closed and the prison doors opened wide. But the function was the same, social control. And when we wonder why 80% of the population in New York State is people of color.
And only come from 3 boroughs.
Yeah, it only comes from 3 boroughs. Yeah, they don't come from Staten Island. Yeah.
Or Park Slope anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that perspective, you know, then we understand how this, you know, this whole thing evolves. You know, police bureaucracies tend to perpetuate themselves, and they grow. And the police grew from a bunch of rednecks to the awesome organization that that the police represent now. You know, they're a national organization. They're a national organization, man. And they lobby and control every aspect of their jobs. So how do we change this?
Community control.
Yeah, community control is only a first step, but community, organizing the community is the first step. The political process in America is the only game in town. It's the only game in town. That's why we got President Trump. You know, he managed to get elected president of the United States. But he had to do that, but he had to get a constituency that backed him, right? A core group that was dissatisfied that he could ride on a wave to power. We have to do the same thing, man. We had Obama, we elected the first black president, and then we re-elected him. He had 8 years in office. Of course, he didn't do nothing, you know. But it demonstrated that we had the power to elect who we wanted in office, right?
The process of felon disenfranchisement impacts the
felon
people to vote.
Felon disenfranchisement. You know, I came out of prison, and you know, people talk about not getting jobs. I came out to a $60,000 a year job with the NAACP and all the civil rights organizations in this country. And because I had filed a class action lawsuit against felon disenfranchisement, right? And we built a movement all over this country. But the lawyers ended up controlling the money, and they decided that we weren't going to build a community by community organizations, a movement, and they decided, man, that the money should just go to lawyers and lobbyists. I'm talking about this was the biggest movement in this country on felon disenfranchisement, right?
So the real question is, even for our audience, is who's a part of that Democratic club, right? Who in your household is registered to vote?
Yes.
These are sort of the small conversations the community should be having. And we need, I think, my personal opinion, I don't know if you agree, but I would love to ask you this. I believe we need less 501c3s and more 501c4s, and we can have voter registration and literally have pools of people directly impacted by the same issues they choose to change.
501c3s and 501c4s, anything that the government permits,
right,
you know, is suspect. You know, for the last 45 years, we have been 501c3s have been working on an issue, say drug policy, and there might be 5 of them in Harlem. They don't talk to one another. They talk to the one that gave them the grant, right? And so it's kept us separated.
Right, it's not community building.
Yeah, it's not community building. You know, I've finally taken myself out of offices, and I can be found on 133rd Street, Lenox Avenue. That's my office. Yeah, and I don't want to take too much time.
No, I wanted to ask you. So, Mr. Johnson,
the work you're doing now, you have a full construction class for people mostly on public assistance, which means you're taking people who are coming right out of prison. Let me just say this really quick. Rikers Island cycles about 100,000 people per year, literally through the doors. Mostly disenfranchised, lose their job. If you don't show up for your job 6 days, 7 days in a row, it's over. You have no job. Sometimes people lose their homes and their family. And when they come home, they're disenfranchised. They end up back in the shelter system, which costs us $27 a month for each citizen in New York. But then also, we have a system of disenfranchisement that permanently blocks felons from employment, right? So you're dealing with people who are coming home who need to get their RA number, who need to keep their food stamps, but also they have a program in the city called Back to Work, which doesn't do anything. It just teaches you how to go back to work for 40 hours a week. So you've actually have a construction class that teaches a person a full course. And I wanted to just maybe you could speak on, because you do a lot more than that. You're more of the neighborhood and the community in Bronx Borough counselor. You know what I mean? Because people having a myriad around problems that impact post-incarceration. So when you leave Rikers, even though the mayor said he's someday going to start employment for people coming home, and I actually am on the mayor's behavioral task force. This is why I disagree with a lot of the policy he says, because I tell him to his face the same thing. How has that impacted you in seeing the youth who are struggling with so much more and so less community now? You know, when you was younger, you know, I'm sure there was uncles and aunts and community was more supportive. But some of these kids that come to you and some of these young adults that come to you have nothing and literally are on their own. I want to know if you could speak to that and some of the solutions that you provide as well here, because I think at the end of the day, there's going to be people cycling out that need that information to help.
And then we can close out with some final.
As we notice, I do counseling. I'm a counselor here. I've been in counseling for 36 years. So there isn't one area that I haven't touched on: homelessness, HIV, substance abuse, mental illness. All of those areas I've had 5 or more years of experience in. But I'm at a time frame here in New York City where there's a big movement going on, and it's not pertaining to the servitude of the people. It's about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. What do I mean about that? I'm talking about this gentrification thing. A lot of things in terms of the social services that were at randomly where you could go every other block and find a social service need being met. They're cutting social service programs down, increasing rents, and providing less services. There is even a movement, I don't know, most people know that if someone has been in the shelter system for 3 months, 90 days, the city is offering them to pay 1 year their rent if they move out of the state. And that's real. They set up all of these programs, like the LINK program, the Section 8, all of that was given a time frame to create a dependency, an attitude of dependency, to know that at the end of the time frame that they would snatch that away from the people and the people would be dependent, not independent. And so therefore, if they weren't dependent, they would get lost up in this new system that is arising here. And the people fell for it. And this whole thing about some people, they're moving them out of the state for this 1 year payment, rent-free. At the end of that, what's going to happen? You find yourself in Colorado somewhere in the woods, and you don't know how to work for your money, you know, because you're dependent. All type of social service needs come about right now. I have even hospitals referring clients to me because of the lack of facilities to provide services to the people. And I find out that also that the most need of people is something that we really don't work on, but some people think that they grow up with it, that they grow up just being able to take care of themselves physically and mentally, but they forget about the spirituality. Because let's say you got out of jail, Rikers Island, in 15 years, you don't have any education, you wasted your time in there, and then you come out here and you're getting rejected like they were telling on the stream. So even though you've left Rikers Island and you left the thought of suicide in there, when you get out here and there's no hope, what do you think you might be feeling? And that's what comes in my doorstep. That's what comes in my doorstep. And that's what we try to provide here. We try to provide what we call wraparound services to the best of our ability. We initially find out or zero in on the most critical need for the individual at that particular point in time to alleviate or direct them in a way where they might get some alleviation of that pain that they are dealing with, in hopes that they might be able to override it, get past it and move on to the next level. That's what we provide here as opposed to other places. When you go to the primary social services, have a number, take a seat, you didn't come in on time, we didn't call your name yet, that's not what we do here.
Yes,
we look at the holistic aspect of the individual who walks through these doors, and we try to find out, is your child have something to eat? Did you eat? Do you have car fare? What was the highest grade you completed? Do you have a desire to want to go to school? Okay, if you do, this is what we can offer you. Our construction training program, which is a 6 pre-apprenticeship construction training program for what we call the dislocated worker. And this is exactly the category that you have had to put yourself in to become accepted for this program, a dislocated worker. Now, what does that mean? That means that somebody who has actually been fired from a job for whatever reasons, somebody who has lost their job for whatever reasons, somebody who is, their job terminated and now they're on unemployment, okay? So that's how you become eligible, getting fired from your job.
So you're building a community from the ground up.
Right. So we try to help give you stuff as you're in this process to help you learn how to stay on a job. Because evidently you got fired because something didn't work. So I try to zero in on that, help you with that, so that next time, by the time you complete the program, you'll be able to stay on a job. Okay, that's where the wraparound services come in at. Now, this is a free training program. You get it for free.
Yeah, we need to.
It's $6,000 for each person that goes through this training. They're trained in the area of carpentry, electrical, plumbing, painting, plastering, landscape. Those are the 5 areas: plumbing, electrical, painting, plastering, landscape, and carpentry. And at the end, we give them what you call a HBI PAC certification, pre-apprenticeship training certificate in the area of construction. Now, when they leave here, they will be able to talk the language. They will not be somebody with a 10-hour OSHA class who learns how to keep the place clean. They will be someone, when they come to apply for their job, they will have a resume that's prepared properly, and they will also know the language of the trade.
So moving to the next generation, let me just mention a few things. I want to thank you for that, because here at Andrew Freeman Home, and definitely the collaboration between Incarcerated Nation, where we provide legal services, immigration services, we also have our own college program as well, where you get 6 bar credits. So I think that it's important when you come home and you have to keep your social services, and they say, well, either go back to work, back to school. We do both. Mr. Johnson also provides food pantry services, so we have pantry services specifically for people directly impacted, and it becomes an impact for the people on the ground, right? And then we have organizations like Just Leadership, who is doing sort of like the big overhead on the front, right? And then fast forward in a few generations, because I wanted to set this before I asked this question to you, right? We come from a different generation. We come from a generation where it was a little bit angry. When I was on Rikers, and when I helped produce this film with Bill Moyers and Mark Levine, actually, Mark did this film, the one who did your documentary, and he's just calling me like, what's next, Bob? He's a great man, him and Mark Benjamin as well. And when we did this film, I wanted to focus on the culture, right? So I didn't need corrections input because they read from the script. I wanted the culture. And the culture was that as soon as you got in, you got with the program or else. And it becomes sort of like a culture that's in the community. When I first came home, my godfather said, the project is open air prisons. And everything made sense to me when he said that. Because I'm in the projects, come outside, I see my friends, I sit on the bench, cops pull up, they jump out, hey, let me see ID, they search me down, they pat me down, do you live here? Get locked up, I go to Rikers, I'm in the yard, the cop pulls up, he jumps out, he pats me down, he asks me for my ID, he's like, do you live in this building? I'm like, what is this? And I look around, it's the same contractors, so the same bricks that's in the projects is in the prison, the same products that's made in the prison that goes to serve the projects, right? This is why we created this state property event,
And I'm hoping that people will stay tuned in as we do these live panels to dissect this. So it kind of made me feel a different way, because in our generation, you fast forward about, 2 decades, a decade or two, and you have FEMA. I mean, you also have RICO laws. And you have the federal system where now the feds and the state is playing together. Where that is, if you go through Rikers and you're classification 8, and you get into a fight and they put you on wheels, by the time you finish 3 or 4 houses, you up to like 99. Now you're in the box. Now you're this dangerous Hannibal Lecter person, right? I'm in Rikers, and the first cells were for house gay. And cleaning the place, locking everybody else in became my duty. I worked for a CO named Haywood, who eventually got locked up for selling cigarettes. And I realized the whole system was a farce. He's like, oh, I need to move you to the dorm side. Dude, I'm in like 4 building, 4 main. There is no way, I can't leave this house without a security. Next week, my classification dropped. He had me in a sprung selling cigarettes, right? So it becomes a system where you have no choice. I go pick up my cartons. I'm walking through the hallways. I'm like, how am I going to get past the mag? CO's like, nah, come here, don't worry about it. Go around the mag. Get down the hallway, another CO pull up, search me down when I went to go pick up some money. I'm getting nervous. He's like, oh, you got that money? Because he was saying. So like, it was like 20 or 30 of them all involved with this system. And it powers in the youth. It pulls in the youth to then sort of raise their status while they're there. And then when they get shipped up, you could have went to a minimum. You could have went to the medium, but you end up going to a max because your classification is now more. Now you done proved. So they're like the polishers for the state. And then they pass you off, right? In the reception centers. Much more dangerous on paper than you was the kid who got locked up with initial misdemeanor charge, right? Or the crime that you've done, right? Or quote unquote committed. So I wanted to ask you a few things, because our generation was a little different because you come home without these resources, right? So how important is it on the ground work, but also above policy work, because you're working with an organization, my friend Glenn, who has Just Leadership USA, which everybody should go visit. And it's saying that those directly impacted by those issues should be the voice, right? So we heard from Jazz, who said when you come home, you have no legal voice, right? We heard from Mr. Johnson, who said years ago the community was involved, and that was sort of like your backing when you came home, welcoming you home. I remember the church used to put up a collection for you, or Gloria's son is coming home. Now it's such a number system with 2 million people cycling in and out, and we have over 100 million people living post-incarceration, 1/3 of the American population. Majority of those are young kids who went in young and come out a grown man now with responsibility, sometimes kids. Like, how vital is both of those to be played? Because we also need to have you in the media. We also need to see people who said, I was homeless with this man, or I was with this young man. Now he's up there as a leader. It inspires me, right? So I wanted to hear a little bit about your experiences and your personal changes coming home, but how important it is for leadership from someone who's impacted on all those levels, right? Because our generation got caught up with being a part of a gang, being a part of a movement, having this negative label on you, and now all of those experiences is needed to help show and shine light on the system that's applied, right? And then we can do final comments.
My last experience coming home, I was basically released from Bridgeport Community Center at 6 o'clock in the morning with no money, no nothing. Like, Raphael, you can go home. I'm from the Bronx. I don't know nothing about Connecticut. I didn't know how to walk to the Metro North, no nothing. I took excuse my language, I took myself and I walked, I asked somebody, how do I get to the Bridgeport train station? They pointed me in the right direction. And I hopped my way back from Bridgeport, Connecticut, September 26th, all the way back to the Bronx, to Fordham Road. Then from there, my first day home, I had nobody to talk to. I had nothing. I went to the welfare office right there on 125th Street. You know what I'm saying? And basically, I'm not even gonna lie. My first thing I did when I came home, I smoked half a stick of K2, and I paralyzed. I was literally paralyzed from the neck down, smoking a stick of K2, half a stick. That I'm in that park on 128th, like, I don't know what to do. You know what I'm saying? Fast forward it, I go to the welfare office, I get some food stamps. Now it's like my first day home after doing 11 months in Connecticut. I'm in a roof on 183rd and Grand, sleeping, like, looking at God, like, what the hell did I get myself into? Like, I should have just, why didn't you just keep me in prison? I would have had something to eat tomorrow. I had a place to stay. Why did you do this to me? You know what I'm saying? So I'm in the roof. So, and then I came to my head, like, I don't want this no more. I don't want to keep going in and out of prison. I could have went outside. I could have sold drugs. You know what I'm saying? I could have did all this stuff. I'm from 183rd in the Bronx. Like, that's what we know how to do, violence and drugs. I took upon myself I want more. You know what I'm saying? I wanted more. I wanted my life to mean something, you know what I'm saying? And so I would just started searching for this to mean something. And then I came across I was on internet searching. I was going to school being I found out I had to do an internship for a year. So I was like, all right, and most of my professors was like, this is a good time for you to get into the field where you want to go into or learn evidence-based models or develop connections. So I started Googling stuff, and I came up to Just Leadership USA, and basically right there, Glenn caught me with those closest to the problem or closest to the solution. Before
all the problems, right?
You know what I'm saying? So I was like, wow, this he sounds just like me. So like, you know what I'm saying? I just started like trying to get myself more involved into the community, and basically, it has Just Leadership has 3 components. They have a training, they have an advocacy, and then a membership program. The training is basically they go out and look for members of the community as ex-offenders who are committed to criminal justice reform, and basically, they take those and hone up their skills and give them more resources and networks so they could, you know what I'm saying, be a contributive force to the criminal justice reform.
So on both of those levels. On the level you coming home with no resources, we see what Mr. Johnson is providing, what we do here is vital. And then on the level on the macro, it's important to have those role models out there, those leaders nationally out there. And I applaud Just Leadership and of course Close Rikers, the effort of the collaborative organizations working to close down Rikers. But I wanted to ask you just a final question, right? When you get to Rikers and you're a part of a gang, it's almost like a family. It is a family. It's an extended family. I want to just say that the history of gangs in New York has always been prevalent. And it has always been the tradition of New York gangs to hate the next set of immigrants or people coming in, right? So the Irish hated the Italians and so on and so on. And the same sort of system happens in Rikers Island too. And that is a trap, right? It's a trap because it leads you with more charges. It leads you with this persona of a person who needs to be held into a federal facility and locked down for a long time, right? What do you see and what did you see of youth just constantly turn into this cycle, right? I've seen kids come in with small misdemeanors. Anyway, they end up taking a plate, they end up shooting somebody, they end up getting caught up in another incident, and next you know they're doing life, or they're doing 10 or 20 or 30 years. And it becomes this cycle that you're upstate taking care of another facility, because according to New York State, we only count census of the counties you live in. So if you're residing in Attica, your community's suffering while you're gone. So the millions of people and the thousands of people that we incarcerate out of the community means less lights, less funding, less community centers, less population of people, and actually less, you're actually hurting while you're helping, right? And it's this system called gerrymandering, right? Yeah. How did you see that and that impact your life? Because I'm sure that your vision changed at that point. Like, I cannot keep this self-destroy myself. But how many youth did you see go through that system? You know?
The countless numbers of people I seen in prison, like kids and adults, and all, like, it's crazy. Like, it's just a cycle. It's a cycle that I really got tired of living. That I was mad at myself really for subjecting myself to the abuse that these people would do to us.
At 16, you're an adult in New York. So.
And supposedly at 16, I'm an adult, but yet I can't go to the liquor store and buy a bottle of liquor until I was 21. First thing I really remember is basically, I was a little different than most of my counterparts at 16 because I had sort of like a education. Mm-hmm. Most of my counterparts at 16 on Rikers Island didn't know how to read. They didn't know how to have any type of educational background. I got my GED the first time I took it. Like, you know what I'm saying, in Arthur Kill Correctional Facility, and 108 days in school. So I look at Rikers Island at a different perspective than most people, because I look at it like, how can, I really was like abandoned through the system. I've slipped through the cracks every which way, and it hurts me, and that's why I'm here doing what I'm doing with Just Leadership USA and Close Rikers Island, because I refuse to let another kid, 16-year-old with potential, go through the system and lose his life because these people just want to misdiagnose or misclassify you, or just put you away and just throw you into the gray waste. I'm tired of that. It's a wrap. Like, I'm not letting that happen no more.
So I wanted to just add some final comments as we go. I just wanted to say that we are on a 10-year plan, quote unquote, to the mayor to close down Rikers Island. And for those who are watching, public comment is available. Go to jailsaction.com, go to closerikers.org, and you can sign up to be able to be a regular person in these events, to be able to put your public opinion. 2, you can speak for constituents. I think one of the biggest problems of supporters is that people say, well, I've never been to Rikers, my kid's never been to Rikers, what does it have to do to me? Well, you're the person paying $167,000 per person, as this man revealed with John Liu when he gave you the reports and the finances for how much we pay in the city, right? And then we also, if you're not paying for it, you're probably buying the products that's made from there, right? At one time, Rikers was contracting out to Whole Foods and creating bread from there, baked in Rikers being sold at an astronomical amount. So all of these things, that means everyone and every citizen in this city is impacted, and we need to pay attention to this because this documentary was made to not only humanize people, but point out a fact that we are spending more for this island than we do for the 60,000 people homeless every night, than we do to the mental health system, where the task force had put $30 million into health treatment into Rikers. And when he asked me, I was like, well, it should go to the bail fund. And that's how the bail fund got money, which Jazz started, which basically then sort of proceeded into the Brooklyn bail fund and then the Queens, and then now we have them in every borough. So we went from 20,000 people to 9,000 people on Rikers, because that is how many people were there for $250 bail. That is how many people were there for $100 bail. That was how many people there for like $500 bail, and all misdemeanor charges. So I wanted to just give some last comments and thank you very much for coming out for this very in-depth discussion, because bail, cash bail, the community playing a part, each citizen's role, like Mr. Johnson's era, right? And also the youth that we often leave out and perceive as negative, but when given the opportunities, when given the resources, you're going to college, you're becoming a leader, you're thinking about starting your own nonprofit program, and here you are, inspiration for many more in the country, right? And that's important and vital to recognize that we have from 1960s up on this panel, and nothing has changed with the city, but the people who have been impacted have been changing other lives. Final comment.
Okay. Prisoners come from the community. Can we agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Yeah. Can we agree on that?
Yes. Yes, we can.
That prisoners come from a community.
Right.
And they brought to this space, go to jail, and they stop there, but they return to the community. Okay? So the community should have some voice in who these people are. What happens to their community members while they are in prison, right? And if we look at the system now as it exists, parole board, criminal justice background, right? Mostly police and XDAs, determination of what the community needs is never a part of the community process. The prison process, right? What are we training them for? The community should be speaking on that. So should have control of that.
Public comment, and a call out to say, if you feel about this movie, write to your local legislation, your city council, if you're assemblyman, your senator, and a personal letter to them as well makes an impact. Ending cash bail, because it's a system of ransom in the city, and that is one of the two big feeders into Rikers, right?
Yeah, we need community control
of
everything. This criminal justice system, man, because this criminal justice system is the enforcement arm of the state. And the state is the organized power of the ruling class. Now, can we agree on that?
Yes.
Yeah. They the ones that define what crime is, and without law there is no crime, and without crime there is no punishment, right? So, they are the ones, man, and we have to become them. We have to become the ruling class.
And that means also paying attention to those jury duty slips that come in, because you can't be convicted by a jury of your peers if we don't never show up for jury duty.
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Johnson.
Okay.
Some final words?
Yeah. Final words. The prison population reflects the population in the community. They are not, they didn't come here in the prison, as a blank sheet of paper, right? They came there because they reflect the lack of opportunity, the lack of upbringing, and the lack of values. All of that happens in the community. I mean, the prison is the prison population. You don't need to go to prison to see that. All you need to do is go into one of them neighborhoods, right? And you will see the prison population. I mean, they walking around with their pants off their ass and no respect for nobody. It's all about them. That's the prison population.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, last reflection is I also run a Father's Initiative program, because it reflects upon the population that we serve and the need to help men to understand their role in the family structure. Because in this, like we're talking about systems, one of the things I noticed that our children, the first thing they're taught is how to call 911 on their children, which is an entrapment to break our family structure up. My daughter said it to me one day. I was laying on the couch. Daddy, you know how to call 911 on you? I was like, what? I didn't know I said, where did you get that from? And why would you say something to me like that? She said, I learned it in school. I said, but I didn't do anything. And right then and there, I knew that we were in trouble as families. And so what I do is try to cohesively teach the families, from the father, the parent, the child, how to collectively stay together, because these systems are a lot bigger than us. And Mr. Hayden said, and you said, that we need to continually educate, use our experiences to help those who come in behind us to not make the same mistakes, and pray that, we do help save some lives.
Definitely. I just really got a question. Not even a question. Leo posed a question. I think, was it Nixon or Reagan that posed the term super predators and stuff like that? Clinton, right? It was Clinton. So my question is, what happens when a super predator reforms? What do you call that?
Right. That's a great comment, and I'm going to leave on that note.
During the late 80s, 1989, Hillary Clinton commissioned a report called Super Predators, written by a Princeton professor. I actually undid that report with the Princeton professor. And they used a young Hispanic, half Spanish, half black kid who was just incarcerated, but actually promoted on the front page of the New York Times by Donald Trump. And that kid was Raymond Santana. That case was the Central Park 5. So 41 states created juvenile laws based off of a false case, and we need to readdress that. I readdressed it with Princeton with that professor, and the tale is amazing. The professor actually was going through other personal problems. His daughter married a black guy, and he had a lot of issues when he wrote the report. He actually rescinded the report since then. Hillary Clinton has given them sort of a award about it, but we still have 41 states that lock up kids. We have 33 states that incarcerate kids at any age. The age of reason in America is 9. And if anyone is watching, could go to our YouTube channel and watch a film called Prison Kids, which I did with Cory Booker and Russell Simmons, about how we spent about $5 billion locking up kids for crimes that ain't even crimes. And a lot of those were some of the misdemeanors you were incarcerated for, right? So we incarcerate kids at a high rate, then we charge them cash bail, we give up on them in the community, as Mr. Johnson said, where it used to be at, and then we have to have and hope that some of these kids end up like you, going to college, realizing later on in life, after missing their whole childhood and going through a struggle and trauma and dealing with it, that they end up a success story. But we can stop that by our own opinions and our own votes. So I thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you for this panel. I want to thank my panelists as well for the work you've done, and definitely Jazz for the inspiration and also being there for the world, because you have created a system that hasn't stopped, and that's a system against the system. And I thank you all tonight for State Property. I want to give my thanks to Andrew Freeman Home, also Mid-Bronx Senior Council, the Incarcerated Nation, Closed Rikers, Just Leadership as well, and of course our open choir who is here from Italy. So I'm hoping everybody will come through and see the rest of the events that we have lined up in this agenda. Thank you.